Greetings. Welcome to Lesson 1 of how to play Xiangqi. Xiangqi is Chinese chess, which shares a common ancestor with Western chess, and Western chess players will find it an easy transition to begin to play Xiangqi. Xiangqi is pronounced, of course, in Mandarin, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. So my apologies to any Mandarin speakers out there. The game is played on a 9x10 board. It's nine points left and right, 10 points in ranks, and the game is played on the intersections of the board, not the squares themselves. So as a result, there's 90 points of play instead of 64 as in Western chess. There's many similarities between the two games, as well as some differences. We're going to introduce the game in a simplified way by taking off most of the pieces. We'll go into the setup mode of the program here and clear. So right now we'll just look at the two pieces that are on the board at all times. There's two kings. These two are on their home square, and as we'll find, they have very limited movement. The two kings each are confined to their palace, which is a little square area here marked with an X. So there's 9 points where the king can move. And the kings move up and down orthogonally, and that's all. They can move this way, this way. They can move backwards, but they must remain in their palace. This goes here. Now, if this red king would like to move up to here, he's not allowed because it's outside his palace. And there's one other restriction on the movement of the king, is that the kings cannot be placed on the same file with no intervening pieces. This is called the royal rule. So if it's black's move here and he'd like to move here, right now he can't because the two kings would be directly, think of it as in line of sight with no pieces intervening. That royal rule, or the king opposition rule, is very important later in the game, and we'll find that the king plays a role usually in constructing a checkmate. Another feature of besides the palace, another feature of the board is the river, and there's this blank area right here in the front, in the middle. The pieces that are allowed to move across can kind of ignore the river. There's a few pieces though that cannot cross the river, as we'll find as we cover each of the pieces. Next we'll introduce the pawns. And as in Western chess, the pawn is the least powerful piece on the board. There's 5 of them, and they go right across this row right here. And black is the same. Oops, no. And as you'll note, the little diagram, which is a Chinese character, differs between the two. And they mean something in Mandarin, if you can read that language. In this game, red goes first, if I didn't mention that before. In any diagrams and in any computer programs, red will go first. In practice, as you sit and play with a friend, a lot of times the players will just switch off and black may move first in those practice games. It really doesn't make any difference. The pawns move forward in a similar way to Western chess. They move 1 square forward. They're never allowed to go 2 squares at a time as in Western chess. 1 square forward. Pawns can never go backwards. Okay, now red has gone forward. Now here's where it differs a lot from Western chess. As you know, Western chess, the pawns capture on a diagonal. In this game, they do not. They capture in the same way that they move. So this black pawn would move forward to capture this piece thus. Red goes forward, black goes forward, and then if red wants to capture this, he would go there to make the capture. And that's as simple as the pawn moves. Now, once the pawn crosses the river, this middle area, then it is allowed to move sideways. It can never go diagonally or backwards, but it can move sideways after it crosses the river. So if it's black's move now, this one could move forward still, but he could also move to this square, or he could move to this square. So this one, say, elects to go here, red moves forward, and then black could, for instance, capture this thus. Red moves forward, black could capture this. The other thing that's very unique about the pawn is that it does not promote. If it gets to the end, see now this one, for instance, can move sideways at this point. King moves forward, or the pawn moves forward. Pawn moves here. And at this point, it is still a pawn. It cannot ever promote. It does not become a queen or a rook or anything at all. But it can move sideways. Black's move, and now he can go sideways, for instance. He could go there, here, as much as they want to sideways. And for this reason, as it reaches the end, it loses some value because it has fewer squares to go to. In terms of point value, the pawn is worth 1 when it's on its home side of the river. As it crosses the river, it's worth 2 points. And then as it reaches the end, the old pawn, I don't know if it has a point value, but it definitely loses some value as it gets to the end. However, that being said, an old pawn at the last rank can assist in a checkmate. Sometimes that does come up. The pawn can deliver check. This pawn here could deliver check to this king, and as in Western chess, the king has to respond to check. He could go here, for instance, or he could go back, or he could take the pawn, thus. Or he could think about coming here. Right now, this is illegal. Why? Because of the position of the black king over here, which prevents this king at the moment from going to this file. That's basically how the kings and pawns move. It covers the basic movements and as far as where the king can go, he has to stay within the palace. The pawns move forward, much like Western chess players are used to. It captures in the same way it moves, and then when it gets to the end of the board, it does not promote, but can move sideways. That's a good place to stop for now for lesson 1. With the next lesson, we'll cover some of the other pieces that are adjacent to the king or close to the king as in protection. Thank you, and join us for the next lesson. Welcome to lesson 2 of how to play Xiangqi, that is Chinese chess. With the first lesson, we learned how to move the kings. We learned they have to stay within the palace. We learned about the royal rule. And we also learned the pawn movements, that the pawns move forward and can, once they cross the river, can move sideways, and that they capture in the same way that they move, and that they do not promote when they reach the last rank. Well, this lesson will introduce the next piece that's next to the king, called an advisor. You can think of it as sort of a mini queen, which there's 2 of them here. They're like the advisors to the king, and there's 1 on each side of the king. Now, the advisors, like the king, are confined to the palace. They have to stay within the palace, and they move on diagonals, unlike the king, which moves orthogonally, up, forward, backwards, and sideways. The advisors have to move on the diagonal only. So there's only 5 places where each of the advisors can possibly be. So for instance, this advisor would go there maybe, This could go here. This one could go there. It is legal there. This one could go there. This could go there. And that's about all they do, is they shuffle back and forth on these points on this X here in the middle of the palace. And that's all they do. It is merely a protective piece around the king. Typically, the advisors have a way of ending up, right in this sort of pattern. It's almost like a triangle around the king. And we'll find that they're very effective in protecting the king against checkmate. And often the aggressive player who is trying to get a checkmate will seek to capture one or both of the advisors, and that's a strategic goal in producing a checkmate. That's really all the advisors can do. They can capture the same way that they move, but they have to wait for the piece to get within their range of movement first. The next piece we will introduce is elephant. You recall this game, Xiangqi, is called the elephant game. In fact, the word Xiangqi, I believe in Mandarin, means elephant game. The elephant goes in the same place that the Western chess bishop goes, and you can think of it as a predecessor of the bishop or a mini bishop, even though the movement is a bit different. The elephant can move diagonally two squares over, 2 points over. So the red one could go there, for instance, or he can go there, the first move. And that's basically all. They have to stay on their own side, their home side of the river. So this one can go there if he wants to. This one can go back. This one can come here. This is how they move. And that's all. So as a result, there's only 7 different places where each of the elephants can go, and that they duplicate effort. They duplicate points. It's unlike the Western chess bishops, which complement each other by being on different color squares. These pieces actually duplicate each other's movements. And like the advisor, these are defensive pieces which end up often hanging around the king in a sort of triangular pattern here. And, very often there will be some sort of a triangulation around the king in protection. You think of it like a castle. There's no castling move per se in Xiangqi, but there's definitely a protective formation that often develops, which you can think of as a castle-like formation. Another characteristic of the elephant is it can be blocked. It can be self-blocked or blocked by an opponent's pieces. For instance, and suppose Black's elephant here would like to move to this square. Well, he cannot. Why not? Because the piece that Red has placed between here actually blocks the elephant, and the elephant can no longer move over to here at the moment until the intervening piece has moved. The intervening piece may be a friendly piece of his own side, or it may be the opponent's piece, but in either case, there's a temporary block on the elephant for moving when there's an intervening piece. In terms of point value, the advisors are worth about 2 points, and the elephant's worth about 2 points in relation to the unit measurement of 1 for the pawn on his own home side of the river. The advisor and the elephants both can move forward in a forward direction and a backward direction. However, as I mentioned, that the advisor has to stay within the palace, and that the elephant cannot cross the river. They're very defensive in nature. That is all for lesson 2. Thank you for watching, and join us for the next lesson when we will introduce a couple of pieces which Western chess players will find very easy to learn because they're very, very similar to the Western chess equivalents. Thank you, and join us next time. Greetings. Welcome to the third lesson of how to play Xiangqi. With this lesson, we'll consider the horse and the chariot. The horse is very much the equivalent of Western chess knight, and we'll add that first. The horse goes where we would think it would go, right where the knight goes in Western chess. The design is easy for me to remember. If you look at it, it looks a little bit like a horse, someone sitting on the back of a horse and the little feet of the horse sticking down. That's a way to remember, for me to remember what it looks like. Basically, the piece moves in the exact same way that we would expect it to as the knight. It goes from here to here. Now, in this game, it doesn't hop. It doesn't jump over other pieces necessarily. Think of it as moving orthogonally one and then diagonally one. So, for instance, this can go here. This can go here. This knight, for instance, could possibly, they can go backwards. He can go to here, for instance. They can also go to here. I mean, it's legal. It's not a good move, but it's legal. And this could go there, and this could go here. This is legal. One thing that's different, basically the only thing different about the Xiangqi horse is that it can be blocked. If it's black's move, he can go there. Now, red would say, okay, in Western chess, we could just move to here, and he would hop right over this intervening piece. In this game, if there's a piece orthogonally next to this horse, he cannot move over it. So this piece is prohibited momentarily from going here or here. So if that means before he could move his horse, he'd have to move here first. Now this horse perhaps might want to come into this square and deliver check, but he can't because right now there's a piece here. He can, however, move sideways to here and take this piece if he wishes. That's legal. Now this horse, since he's moved that intervening pawn, he can now move forward in the way we'd expect a horse to go. And that is basically how the piece moves. It captures in the same way that it moves. This one would go here and then diagonal and take this piece. Now, for instance, this black horse could go here and then diagonally here, and in doing so, black king or red king would be in check. As you observe, the path to here, path to the red king is unobstructed, so this is check. So the king has to respond to check in some way. He can move his king up, that gets out of check. The only difference between the Western chess knight and the black and the Xiangqi horse is that the Xiangqi horse can be blocked. So we'll go back to the beginning setup here, and we will add the next piece we were going to learn, and that is the chariot. They call it a chariot. It is the equivalent of the rook, and sometimes it is called a rook, and even in the notation, the letter used is R for rook. It is very much a chariot, something that you would pull behind horses in a battle. The chariot will be very, very easy for Western chess players to learn because it moves and captures exactly like it does in Western chess. So the horse or the chariot here can move to this square, for instance. He can go there. He can move up. He cannot go beyond this friendly piece. Or he can move the horse and then maneuver to the open file. And suppose this horse comes out, and now this chariot is free then to go to any point on this file. Suppose here. Black moves over to the open file, and now this chariot now has the option of moving sideways to any of these open spots. Any of these open spots on this second rank. So the chariot is really, really easy to learn. The chariot is definitely the most valuable piece in this game. It's given a point value of 9 or 10, depending on which book you look at. The horse is given a value of the point value of about 4. That's all we need to learn about the chariot. It's never involved in a castling move because there's no castling in this game. Typically, the chariot will try to maneuver to open pieces and infiltrate the position on the opponent's side of the river as quickly as they can without getting trapped or captured. And it creates a lot of havoc down there, especially in concert with 2 or more other pieces. Well, thank you for watching. That'll bring this lesson to an end, and we will pick up with the final piece to learn, and that's the cannon, which is unique to Xiangqi, and Western chess players often have the most difficulty with because it is unlike anything in Western chess. So join us. Thank you. Welcome to Lesson 4 of How to Play Xiangqi. With this lesson, we're going to introduce the last piece that we haven't covered yet. So far, we've covered all the pieces that are shown here on the board: king, pawn, elephant, horse, and chariot. And the only one remaining is the cannon. Now, I've saved it for the last because it's the one piece that is totally unlike anything in Western chess. So we're going to go to the setup mode and add the 4 cannons. There's 2 on each side. The piece has a little J shape on there, which if you use your imagination, you can think of it sort of as a carriage for the transportation of a cannon. Some have called it a catapult at times, but I think it's probably originated as a cannon. It goes there on that marked square just where I've placed that. That's the home place for the cannon. So the cannon has a kind of a unique move. For instance, this cannon on the red side here, the way that it moves to maneuver around the board is identical to a rook. For instance, this cannon can move to this square, or it can move to there, or here. It can go backwards. It can go clear over here if it wishes, or over to here. But as soon as it meets up with another piece, it has to stop. So it can go forward here, 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 but no further in moving around and maneuvering. But it captures in a different way. It captures in a very unique way that's a little bit hard to grasp at first. This cannon can only capture something that is beyond the first piece it comes to. For instance, this one right here has one piece, which may be a friendly piece or it may be the opponent's piece, right there, and then it can capture the next piece of the opponent, which lies beyond there. So this piece right here, this other, which happens to be also a cannon in this position, is called the cannon mount. So each capture of a cannon has to have a cannon mount. So right now, it is legal anyway for this cannon to leap over this cannon mount and then capture the one remaining piece behind there, thus. And that is the movement of the cannon. If we maneuver around a little bit, just to show other ways it can capture, like he could move here, for instance, in the first move. and this piece can move here, for instance. And then this cannon, now he has a couple different captures he's has available to him. He can likewise he can jump over this cannon mount and capture this horse behind here, or he can jump over this cannon mount and capture the next piece here. What he cannot do is he cannot jump over both of these and capture anything beyond here, nor can he jump over here and just land on an empty spot right there, for instance. That's illegal. He has to jump over and then capture the next thing. So it's kind of a unique move. Suppose he comes and captures this. Now it's black's turn. This piece, he can move various places, forward and backward and sideways, but there's no captures available to him because he has no cannon mounts. However, this other cannon here does have a capture. For the moment, this cannon would not be allowed to go backwards. He could do several other things. The reason is this cannon is right now delivering check to the black king. The black king sitting here, there's a cannon mount. So this cannon, the red cannon, is actually delivering check. So black has to respond to the check. And he could do some of the usual things like move an elephant there, or move the advisor here, move this advisor, or he could move this aside. That would eliminate the check, because then this red cannon does not have a cannon mount. Or he could, since he has a capture available, he could move clear to here and capture this, and that would save himself from check. So this is a tricky little move the cannon makes. This is interesting. If he comes here and captures this, notice the red king is not in check because there's no cannon mount between here. And the black king is not in check because there's no cannon mount between there. So that indeed may have been a pretty good move to come here and take a pawn and eliminate the check that he was faced with. That's how the cannons move. What we're going to find is that they are, first of all, a little difficult for Western chess players to really grasp and take and internalize to where they're second nature. But we'll also find that the cannon is an extremely valuable piece in administering checkmates. So let's just try to set one up and show how useful a cannon can be. This is something that would come up in a game pretty much. Very often, we will make it red's move. Very often the cannon finds a happy home in the center square, or center file, pointing right at the opponent's king. And you get a cannon entrenched there, and then the defender has a really difficult time defending. And as we notice, this cannon is not delivering check at the moment because there's two pieces here. The worst he could do is to come take this advisor sitting here, and that would be not a good move because he would just lose it. But just leaving it here immobilizes both of these pieces. It immobilizes the advisor and immobilizes the elephant. The elephant cannot move because that means the red king would be delivering, or red cannon would be delivering check, and the advisor cannot move because of the same reason. The cannon now is delivering check with the single cannon mount between the cannon and the king. So what that means, if it's red's move, this rook can actually go forward, clear to here, and deliver check. Now you notice he's protected by this king way back here. Remember the royal rule where the king protects anything on this file that's as long as there's no intervening pieces. And since that is true, the king cannot take this because the red king is protecting the rook. This advisor cannot retreat because of the aggressive placement of this cannon here. So this is checkmate. Let's look back again at it, just to illustrate the awesome power of a cannon. Red rook forward. This is check and checkmate. beautiful example of the power of a centralized cannon as well as the supportive nature of the royal rule king. That's the last piece we have to learn. In terms of point value, the cannon is worth about 4.5 points, or at least that's what the books give. Generally, in common play, you can consider the horse, which is valued at 4, and the cannon to be worth about the same. Part of the reason is towards the end of the game, the cannon sometimes becomes very hard to manage because as the pieces are captured and start to disappear off the board, there's not too many cannon pieces available to serve as cannon mounts. And so the cannon, way in the end of the game, can be difficult to use, and it seems to lose some effectiveness. But generally, it's about 4.5 points. With the next lesson, we'll turn our attention to some odds and ends of rules that are different between Xiangqi and Western chess. That is all. Thank you, and join us for the next lesson. Welcome to our fifth lesson on the rules of Xiangqi. We've covered the movement of all the pieces, as well as some of the very basics about some of the strategies, and we've covered the movement of all the pieces: the king, advisor, elephant, horse, chariot, as well as the cannon. And with this lesson, we're just going to talk about a few of the rules that are in Western chess, but not in Xiangqi or vice versa. First, by its very nature, there's no castling move in Xiangqi. The king, of course, has to stay within the palace. In the chariot, there's no king movement 2 squares with a chariot hopping over like there is in Western chess. It just doesn't exist. There's a castle-like formation often where the king is protected by his 2 advisors and his 2 elephants, and you could think of that as a castle. To illustrate, we'll go ahead and go into the setup position here and just throw a couple advisors around here and an elephant and 2. And this triangular shape, you can think of it as a castle or protective position, but it's done 1 piece at a time. Also, there's no en passant rule. I know a lot of people don't like the en passant rule anyway, but due to the fact that the pawns can only move 1 square at a time, and there's never any option of them trying to bypass each other without the ability to capture the bypassing piece. For instance, if this comes here, if black tries to then to move here as to try to bypass the capture, red can move sideways and capture. So in a way, there's a composite capture already embodied in the rules, in which this is where it differs from Western chess. Whereas in Western chess, if this piece has moved forward 2 squares, then the advanced opponent's pawn would not have a chance to recapture it, and that was the origin of the en passant rule, and that just doesn't come up in this game. The next one that's very, very different and actually changes the character of the game a bunch is stalemate. A stalemate is actually a win for the stalemating side in this game. It is not a draw. Much of the strategy of endgames in Western chess is to save inferior positions, and that ultimately the saving tactic is a stalemate. However, in this game, there is no saving the game by stalemate. If you're stalemated, you lose. And we'll try to set one up here. Okay, so now if it's red's move here, he can set up a stalemate and win the game. And it's done by, let's observe, first of all, because of the royal rule and the placement of the red king controls everything on this file. The king is on his home square, and the two advisors here are seemingly protective, and yet they also are kind of, one is blocking the movement of the other, and the only one of the two, the only one that can move is the forward one. Watch what red does. He pops this chariot over to this square, pinning the advisor. This forward advisor cannot move at all. The rear advisor has no legal moves. The king cannot move to the file, which is covered by the royal rule, and that the forward advisor cannot move forward or backwards. So black is in actually a state of stalemate, and this loses for black. Red wins this game by introducing the stalemate. It comes up in a lot of studies and in games. In actual play, it doesn't come up, at least at an amateur level, a whole lot, but it is an option to play for the stalemate and produce a check and a win by stalemate. The final rule I'm going to cover here that's different is that there's no draw by repetition in this game. As far as I know, the only way you can get a draw in this game is by agreement or by insufficient mating material. You cannot save a game by getting a repetition. Suppose, for instance, that red is looking at getting a checkmate in one move here, just like this. And we'll put a piece of like right there. Okay, so red, for instance, could, if it was red, it's red's move, he could go here with check, right? And that would be checkmate. Okay, but we're going to make it black's move. Okay, now if it's black's move, in Western chess we'd say, geez, I need to save my game, I'm going to get checkmated right away. So I'm going to come down here with check, and then red moves here, and I'll go here with check, and red moves here, and I'll go here with check, and red moves there, and I'll go here with check. And you just do that repeat the position 3 times. And in Western chess, you say, okay, black got a draw here. In this game, you cannot do that. It is illegal to do so. I honestly don't know the exact specification here. You could maybe come here once, he moves, and then come here once, and then he moves. And then at that point, I don't think you're allowed to make this second check. It's simply an illegal move. You're not allowed to do that. And it's just the rule of the game. You cannot get a perpetual check or repetition of position draw. There's no such thing. It is an illegal move to proceed. So if you get to this point, you cannot move here. You have to do something else. And in this case, then, in this hypothetical example, black would have to come back to here. Then you may indeed, in this hypothetical example, you may indeed end up with this. And of course, this would be a draw due to insufficient material. Those are the basic differences that might strike Western chess players as odd. and yet this is part of the game. So there's no draws by repetition. Stalemate is a win. Oh, and the other thing, we covered this in the movement of the pawns. There's no pawn promotion. We will go back into setup and clear. And we'll place like a red pawn down here and a black pawn here. And make it red's move. And here, red, he can move sideways here. And he can move sideways here because he's across the river. He cannot go backwards. If he goes here, in Western chess, this is a goal of the game, is to advance the pawn to the end and promote it, usually to a queen, or at least to a more powerful piece. In this game, it does not promote to a queen. It does not promote to anything at all. It stays a pawn, and it actually diminishes in value. He can still move sideways and can help administer a checkmate, but he does not promote to a more powerful piece. That's basically all the basic moves that differ greatly from Western chess. So with that, we've covered all the basic rules of the game, and you can play a game now. So I encourage you to go online to the usual sources and purchase a Xiangqi board and set, and find a friend to play with and enjoy the game. Alternately, you can go online and find a place to play online, or you can download a program and play against a computer. I'm using one of many programs here that's available online, or for free online. This one's called XIE Freeware, which I believe XIE means something like thank you, thanks a lot, or something like that. And it also has an engine to use if you want to learn to play against an engine. Thank you for joining us, and check out my succeeding lessons, which develop checkmating strategies as well as some of the opening ideas that might help you start a game. That is all. Thank you.